There is a very strange thing that takes place all over the world, mainly in the United States, where people disappear in huge national parks and are usually never found. Now, what makes this more out of the ordinary than usual disappearances is that they usually go missing within moments of last being seen, and there is never any evidence to suggest where they have gone. Now, some are found, but there is always something different and amiss behind how or why they disappeared in the first place, leaving with theories from being abducted by someone lurking in the national parks to getting dragged away by a wild animal. Here are 5 cases of people disappearing in national parks and forests under incredibly mysterious circumstances. Get comfy, because this one is going to require some serious thinking. Alfred Beilharz. Of all the missing person cases out there, the ones involving children are the most heartbreaking, because the thought of an innocent child disappearing must be absolute torture for their parents. Unfortunately, this was a reality for 4-year-old Alfred Beilharz's family. Alfred was the youngest of 11 children, and in July 1938 was on vacation with his parents and siblings in Colorado's Rocky Mountain National Park. As they were hiking alongside a river, Alfred lagged behind for just a short moment, and when his parents turned around to tell him to catch up, he was gone. But the thing is, he didn't shout, and there was no sound of him falling in the water. The family searched and called out for him before phoning the authorities, who were convinced Alfred had fallen in the water and immediately blocked off the water so his body would not travel too far. After this, bloodhounds were called in. Strangely, the dogs tracked Alfred's scent around 500 feet uphill from where his parents said he disappeared, which was strange. After picking up the scent, the dogs followed it for some time until they reached a fork in the path, and it was here that the dogs allegedly gave up and led down, which was very out of character for trained sniffer dogs. But this wasn't the only strange thing that took place during the search for Alfred. A few days later, a couple of hikers came forward and claimed they had been on the old Fall River Road, 3,000 feet higher and about 6 miles away from where Alfred had disappeared the day before. At the time, they had no idea anyone was missing, but they reported seeing a young boy on a high ridge in an area called the Devil's Nest. They said the boy was sitting alone when he was suddenly moved out of sight, as if he had been dragged back. When they got home and saw the news, they realised that the boy they saw must have been Alfred. After hearing the couple's description, authorities quickly arranged for the area to be searched, and it took 2 days to reach the ridge the couple claimed Alfred was sat on. Not only was it difficult for search crews to climb, it was deemed almost impossible for a small boy to reach. So as you can imagine, this has caused lots of theories to be brought forward about Alfred's disappearance. His family still remain convinced that he was abducted, although absolutely no evidence of this was ever found. No footprints, no clothing, nothing. The official conclusion was that he fell into the river and drowned, even though no body was ever found, and not a single piece of evidence has come forward to suggest this is what happened, apart from the fact the family were walking along a river. The disappearance of Alfred Beilharz remains one of the most mysterious missing person cases in the history of Colorado's Rocky Mountain National Park. Charles McCullough. Charles McCullough was a photographer and had an excellent collection of quality photos he had taken while travelling around the US in his Volkswagen. However, in 1974, 19-year-old McCullough left his Volkswagen at home and set out to hitchhike and bus tour the United States, starting in his home state of Virginia and heading towards Oregon. In late January 1975, after staying with a friend for a few weeks, McCullough left Eugene, Oregon and hitchhiked to Crater Lake to try and capture some of the stunning winter scenery. En route, he visited a store to buy a needle and thread to mend a rip in his coat, and the shopkeeper remembers that he was agitated and seemed upset about something. When McCullough did not return as expected, his family set up a search party which included the FBI, and his father Charles spent the next few months camped at Crater Lake searching for his son, but there was no trace, no tracks, no clothing, nothing. A full year passed with no progress on his whereabouts. Then 2 hikers who were unaware of the disappearance took a wrong turn and ended up in the offbeat canyon in the Crater Lake area. It was here they found an old ripped backpack, and after looking through it, they discovered a car key in the side pocket, which turned out to be the key of Charles's Volkswagen. After notifying park rangers, a horse patrol was sent to search the area, and after just a few hours, they found the remains of Charles. However, the discovery left a lot of unanswered questions. The remains were found 12 miles from the trail, which was strange because on the day Charles is thought to have disappeared, there was 7.5 feet of new snow in the area, so it's hard to believe he could have travelled 12 miles in fresh deep snow. Another mystery is the condition of the remains. Charles's foot bones were still in his socks, but his jeans only contained the broken ends of his shin bones, and the jeans were also unbuttoned, but the rest of his body was completely gone, and just the crown of his head was found 12 feet away. There was no other clothing, no boots, coats, or a shirt, and crucially, none of his very expensive camera equipment was ever found. It's entirely possible his body was scavenged by wildlife and dragged to this location, but this doesn't explain how he died, where he died, or what happened to his equipment and the rest of his body. Investigators eventually ruled the death as natural causes, although his family didn't accept this and believed something more sinister was involved. There has never been any further evidence, and the reasoning behind Charles's death is still unknown. Geraldine Largay. In 2013, Geraldine Largay and a friend set out on the Appalachian Trail, a mammoth trek covering over 1,000 miles from Georgia to Maine. She was following in the footsteps of travel writer Bill Bryson, was an experienced hiker, and was well equipped and prepared for the trip. 9 weeks in, her friend was called home due to a family emergency, but Geraldine decided to continue alone, planning to walk to a nearby mountain where she would spend the night before heading for the Route 27 intersection where she planned to meet up with her husband George. When his wife did not arrive as expected, George presumed she was held up and decided to spend the night in his car and wait for her to arrive. But by morning, there was still no sign of her, so he flagged down a police car and a search began. The thick forest was searched with dogs and horses, as well as helicopters following the route Geraldine had planned on taking, and would have presumably been at that stage. The search covered a 30-mile area and was so extensive it turned into the biggest in the history of Maine, although not a single trace of Geraldine was found. It was 2 years before they found her body. She was located less than 3 miles from her last known location, in an area that was said to have been searched multiple times. She was in her bright tent, which would have been a clear sign when searching the forest, but it was never seen on the initial search. Next to the tent was a burnt-out fire and a makeshift flag. The tragedy of this tale is that Geraldine had apparently been in the same spot for 27 days before she finally succumbed to starvation and exposure. The last entry in her journal, which stopped after 27 days of her writing she was lost, said, "When you find my body, please call my husband and my daughter." Her cell phone also had unsent messages in the outbox asking for help, and remarkably, she was just 10 minutes or so from the well-marked trail. When it emerged where Geraldine's body had been found, there was disbelief from local people and hikers who knew the trail well. They couldn't understand why she would have strayed from the path, and even when she had, why she couldn't get back to it. After all, the trail is used by many people every day. But this isn't the only thing that doesn't add up. It was said that a woman called the ranger station, telling them to phone George, Geraldine's husband, and tell him that his wife would not be meeting him at their pre-arranged location. The whole event is both tragic and unexplained, as many say it seems strange that a highly experienced hiker with food, water, and all the supplies anyone would need to survive could pass away in their tent, whilst a huge search is underway all around them. However, the forest can be a dangerous and deceiving place, and despite searches being carried out, people still do go unnoticed, as what must have been the case with Geraldine Largay. Jared Negret. In July 1991, a Boy Scout group began hiking from Camp Tarquet in California, heading towards the summit of Mount San Gorgonio. In the group was a 12-year-old boy called Jared Negret, who, due to being slightly overweight, trailed behind from the rest of the group and may have gotten off course. As soon as the group realised he was missing, they shouted out and searched all over. During the search, they found shoe prints that matched the shoes Jared was wearing, and also found his backpack, some beef jerky, some sweet wrappers, and his camera. They checked the camera to help in the search, and found a haunting picture of Jared that he had obviously taken of himself after getting lost. Theories as to what happened to him have ranged from being kidnapped to being attacked by a bear or mountain lion, although there are no answers. Sadly, Jared is not the only boy to disappear in this area. In July 2004, 9-year-old David Gonzalez also disappeared without a trace while returning to his parents' car to get cookies. After an extensive search, nothing was found until May 2005, when his partial remains were found in a gully that had previously been searched. Initially, it was thought he had been carried off by a mountain lion and killed, but tests have been unable to confirm this, and no cause of death has ever been determined. It's just scary not knowing what or who was responsible for these disappearances, and the thought of getting kidnapped or dragged off by a wild animal are both just terrifying. Dennis Martin. On June 14, 1969, 6-year-old Dennis Martin was on a camping trip with his family at Spence Field in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. He was playing with his older brother and 2 new friends he had met on the trip, and all the boys decided to sneak up on their parents to scare them. As 3 of them snuck up behind the adults, Dennis, who was wearing a red shirt, went a different way as they thought his red shirt would be too much of a giveaway. The 3 boys then jumped out and scared their parents, expecting Dennis to also appear from his hiding place. But when he didn't, they began to call his name, thinking he was messing around. A few minutes passed and the family started searching, as Dennis's grandfather hiked down the mountain to get help. An extensive search was carried out, but as darkness set in, there was still no sign of Dennis. And despite the weather worsening, rangers and family continued to search throughout the night in the pouring rain. The case made national news, and the search continued for 2.5 months, but nothing was ever found. Dennis was just a few days short of his 7th birthday when he disappeared, and to this day, no one knows what happened to him or how he could have disappeared in a matter of seconds. Many years later, 16-year-old Trenny Gibson also disappeared without a trace in almost exactly the same area, followed in 1981 by 58-year-old Polly Melton. All 3 vanished without a single trace, and we may never know where they went or what possibly took them, but our and their families' minds run wild just thinking about what may have happened to them. So that's 5 national park disappearances that are still unexplained to this day, leaving us wondering how so many people can disappear under such strange circumstances and never be found, and how the ones that are found never leave a trace as to what caused their fate. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week for another video.